Okay. Today we'll be working on the x-axis. This may be a little quicker. I'm just going to get through the x-axis today, so still trying to recover, but I definitely want to get something done and get a stream up for you guys. So we'll get through the x-axis. I've got my parts kind of laid out. I think you can see it here. Not a whole lot. There's a decent amount to do, but not a whole lot to do. So we should be good. So, and I get both cameras up and make sure they're working. It looks like, at least currently, the Nikon's working for today. We'll see if it holds up through the day. All right, so here we go. Be on the x-axis. Some reason the system's running a little slow today. It said I was at 50% memory usage of 32 gig on this laptop. The X carriage we will not be using since we are doing the CNC Tap from Chaoticlab. And I've got that build guide here. So we'll be when we get to putting it on the carriage onto the x-axis, I'll bring that one up. But let's go ahead and get started. Again, we'll be skipping over the X carriage, so we won't need it here. I've got this part already prepared with the 3-hole pattern. So we will need the one with the notch, it says. So let's see if we can use this one today. Find my notched one. That should be this one here. So, don't know how well, there we go. That's got the notch. And it says we need an M5 by 40, and then we'll do our normal bearing stack. M5 by 40s. And that is in this orientation, and it shows it in this hole here. Get that in there. And I think it sits somewhat flush, and then we've got our bearing stack. With shim, bearing, bearing, and shim. There we go. So that takes us through that page. And we're going to need 3 M5 nuts on this one. And again, the one with the notch, which should be this one here, has the notch. Don't know how well, there it is, I can see it. So we'll get that on. Now this piece will face towards the bar and away from this piece, which is, that's going to go, that piece there is going to attach to our rails that are already on the machine. So we need our M5 nuts. I know I pulled them out. Where did I put them? There we go. And these have molded holes that are shaped for the M5 nuts already, so that makes that pretty easy. And we'll see how well they slide in here. Pretty easy, so that's good. Say, trick to use with these is to get them in there, and if they're not quite falling in easy like these did, you just take one of your M5 bolts, thread it in, and pull it through. That's how actually the Prusa instructions say to do it on their printers. So then this, try to get my orientation the same. And that should go on just like this. And everything should line up. And there is a spot right here, a recess for these bearings to go in. All right, don't want to screw anything down yet. So now we're going back to 2 more M540s and our GT2 toothed idler, which is, I've got these here. Came with 2 of them. And the other one will be used for the other side. So this is going in, looks like right here. Two 40s, and this shows it flipped up this way. And there went one of my nuts. There we go. So these 2 are going in here. There we go. Okay. And another M540 to go in that one. This is big enough, and it isn't. But I've got bigger ones over here, including the 4mm for these. Get them started so my nuts don't fall out again. And you don't want to tighten these down too much, because your bearing stack, you don't want it to bind up, or your toothed idler. I'm just going till they feel just a little snug, and then that should be good enough. And they'll pull that nut deeper in as you go. And this one here, that's the tooth idler, is on threads into plastic, so you definitely want to be a little more careful with it and don't over torque it. Again, you also don't want, you want to make sure this idler is moving smoothly. I think this one should be down more flush, so I'm going to tighten it, and I can always loosen it up. There we go. This one just doesn't seem to be catching the nut, so get a little more force in there so that I know that it's catching. And there we go. I think that caught. There we go. So now that one's down, it's not too tight on any of these. Let's see if we can get this one down. I don't know if that hole is going to be deep enough to allow it to Now that hole goes all the way through on that one, not on this one. Like it to be flush so that they're all flush. And they're all nice and flush. That still spins nicely. My bearing stack spins nicely. And on the pictures here in the manual, they say to check your work, make sure that your bearing stack is below the toothed idler. So as you can see here, bearing stack is below the toothed idler. Here's bearing stack, here's toothed idler. So we're good on that one. So that's the right joint. So now we need to move on to the left joint, which is more of the same. All right, let's do this one on this camera. See if I can get a good angle with it. So we're going to use this piece here, which, let's see. Maybe that's good. All right, so this piece here, and this is the other piece. So we need an M5 by 40, and then we'll do our bearing stack. So the orientation they show in the manual is this way to me. It'll be that way for you guys. So the M5 40 goes in here, and get that in. Then on this piece, well, then we'll put our bearing stack on. It came with just enough bearings, so hopefully all the bearings are good because it does not come with any extras. We'll go shim, bearing, bearing, and of course making sure your flanges are opposite. And then the last goes on there. And then same as the last one, we're going to take this piece here. It's got 3 spots for M5 nuts. They should just slide in. And like the last one, they're pretty good at slipping right in there. Hopefully they don't slide right out. That takes us through this one here. So we'll need, it looks like, I think it's 2 more M40s, and then our idler, and then another M40 to go through the idler. All right, so that's going to go, should be this way here. And our idler is going to go this one and this one. Kind of get it lined up there. See if we get this one started into its nut, and that'll help hold it together. All right, that is starting. Two it shows are this one and this one. I pushed one of the nuts out, but that's okay. And then you can see, maybe, you can see where the nuts are, and you can kind of see how you can see the screw starting to thread into it there. and some of them I'm just kind of pushing as much as I can with my finger to kind of get it to hold that nut down so it's not getting pushed. And then I can just keep tightening it up. This just makes it a little quicker. And that nut fell away, so let's see if I can keep it in place so it'll catch, and feels like it did. And then I'm just taking them down to their flush with the top surface. Don't want it to be too tight. Definitely don't want to over tighten this and bind up your bearings or your idler when you get it in. And the idler is going to slip in here. And I believe it's another M540 to hold that in. That it is. That'll slide in. And again, this one is threading. There's no hole here for the nuts. This one threads straight into plastic. So you don't want to go too tight and strip out the plastic, and you don't want to go too tight and bind your idler. So I'm just taking it down to where it's flush with this top surface here, and then my idler spins, my bearing stack spins, and check your work as usual. Bearing stack should be above the idler on this side, and so we've got our bearing stack here and our idler here. So we're good there. That can set to the side. Now we're going to prep the extrusion. I've got it already on the table there, so we're going to need, looks like 6 M5 T-nuts and 6 M3 T-nuts. So I have those here. Here are my M5s. Need 6 of those. So a better angle here. I don't know how I got it to be almost dead straight on there. At least to the camera. So we're going to take, these are going to face out, and I'm just going to slip them in rather than roll them in, since we've got access to the ends. And then the hole on there is going to face out. And then the other 2 M5s go opposite, and they go again with the hole facing out. And then this side gets these 6 M3s. And you'll have 3 on one end that face out and 3 on the other end that face out. And these are not as easy to roll in or roll out as the ones I had on my Magic Studio 2.4 kit. They're a little bit tighter. And these, of course, we're going to need to line up with the rail when we get to the rail here right after this step. And again, this side, the screw hole is facing outward. All right, so we've got 6 in that one, 4 in this one, and 2 on this one, which we can see if it'll switch. There we go. You can see top is the 4, middle is the 6, and bottom is the 2. And that's what we've got. Top 4, middle 6, bottom 2. And they're M5s on the top and bottom, M3s in the middle. All right, so let's go back to this. We will scroll down, and now we're putting the MGN 12 rail. I've already cleaned and lubed the rail just like I did for all the other rails that we did last week. I went ahead and took care of that off camera. No different. Cleaned it with isopropyl alcohol. Once it was dry, flipped it over since there's no fill port on the carriage, and squeezed the grease in from the back side until it started coming out. Ran it around a good bit so that there is lube inside the balls, and got it going well. And now we're going to need M3 by 8. Looks like 6 of them for our 6 M3 T-nuts. These I think I've got a little driver for. Or it's probably, no, yeah, that one there works. It might be the one that broke last week. All right, so what we want to do is line these all up with every other hole on the carriage. That one looks good already. And we can kind of adjust a little bit once it gets on there. And this one is really tight. Let's see if I can do it from there. Doesn't look like it. And again, when I squeezed the grease in, I did try to use a hole that was not going to be getting a screw, just a little cleaner. So that should be good. Get a couple started, then we will slip our guides on. And right now I'm not putting any, not going to tighten them down too much. I just want to get them started, and then I will tighten it down once I get my guides on. So I've got my printed guides here. Just snap them on to make sure that the rail is centered on the extrusion. Now I can tighten these down. And again, I'll go opposites. So I'll tighten down one end, then the next, and then go back to the first, and just alternate until I've got all 6 in here. And all 6 tightened down. And I'm just getting them tight and then giving them a little extra twist just to ensure that they are good and tight. Don't have to over torque them, but you do want them to be on there. Thread locker might not be a bad idea on these, as they are going to, you know, have the carriage riding past them. But I didn't do it on my 4 and have not had any problems. And that's got the, actually got the smaller MGN 9s, the dual 9s on it. I have not upgraded it yet in 12. Okay, so we've got that on. And we're going to take the, looks like the left side x-axis, and that's going to be 2 5 by 10s on the top and an M5 by 30 with a shim on the bottom. So we'll have to line up our T as well, and then after the M5 by 30, I think that's the only piece that goes in that one. Yeah. Okay. And we're going to leave them a little loose because we want to once we get it on the frame, we're going to have to de-rack it. Make sure it's riding evenly on both sides and is square. 2 M5x10s for that side. And 5x30 for the underside with a shim. I'll go ahead and slide that shim right onto the bolt. Hold on to it. There we go. That will be this one here and this side here. And I am going to move both of these in. Same for the bottom one. We'll move it in. That way I can push it back easily. There we go. So that is all the way in, and it looks like it's good. And if I need to, I can always come back and loosen the rail again if I did not get it centered. These slide on nicely, but it looks like I've got it just right. Slide this in. M510s go in, and that looks like just the wrong size. Need to bump up one level. And I feel it grab. I'm going to just leave it loose so that we can adjust it once it's on the frame. Again, I got it grabbed and back it out. Get this lined up. There we go. And then that one's going to go on, and it's got the shim. Grab and back it out. And the side's done. Now let's get this other side on. And push these in. It's a lot easier to push them back into place than it is to try to pull them. All right, and looks like we are fully seated on this side, so our rail's in a good spot. Get these in. And lined up. And again, we're going same thing. 510s. And an M530 with a shim. Now this one also, when we put it on, it's going to have a couple of screws that aren't there. So I've got my holes lined up. Get this tightened down, feel it grab, and then back it off just a hair. Make sure they're nice and loose. And then this one here, we have to line up. That one's a much longer hole, so it's not as easy to see, but once you get the light just kind of angled right, you can see down in there pretty well. All right, so that takes care of that assembly. So now we want to put it actually onto our carriage with some M3x16s. Get some space cleared here. I've got some M316s pulled out. There they are. So we're going to be using 6 M3x16s, 4 on one side, 2 on the other. The missing 2 will get put on later. They'll actually hold the end stop pod that I've got printed out. So let's bring the frame back up. So everything on the frame is good. And what I'm going to do is flip it down and get my rails in here, and then take our X carriage, set it right here, and then I'll try to line my rails up as best I can. So the left side is getting the 4. And this is right in my way to see in these holes. I think that's good. And if you can get one started, the rest should line up fairly easily. And I'm just going to get it started and leave it a little loose. You do not want to strip these out. But let's get this side done. Then we'll get the 2 in the other side. And since we are putting 4 in on this side, I am going to go in a cross pattern and get it as evenly tightened as I can. So far, they're going in pretty easy. Okay, so that side's nice and tight. And this is why we're leaving the screws, these M5s, loose. That way you can get them to make sure that you're able to get into this as well, because I see that I'm not quite there. And this will go in the back, not the front. Of course, now these two are not opposite. I can't cross since we're only putting the 2 in, but I'll do one side, then tighten down the next, and bounce back and forth to where they're as even as I can get them. All right, so now we are good on those. All right, now we want to flip it up, and we'll do this cable bridge with 2 M5 by 16s. Did I put screws in that I shouldn't have? Okay. So I think I got to take these 2 here out. I must have missed something to say not to put those in. Or maybe it said put them in and it's just not reminding me to pull them out. I probably missed it. It probably said don't put them in. Yeah, it doesn't say to put them in, so I just put 2 extras in that I didn't need at the time. That's all right. Easy enough to pull them right back out. and it kept everything lined up while I was getting it secured, so I'm not gonna say it was a bad thing. Again, I'm going to leave it a little loose. I'm going to try to get my X carriage here just a little more even on both ends. All right, and now go back to the desktop. I'd scroll back up to see about those screws, and you can see that it does show not to have them in there. There we go. Now matching up. Put the M5x16s in for that. And then we want to square it up. Make sure that it's square, that the backs both are touching at the same time. And I just realized that camera angle was way off. So those two M16s put this piece here on, which is still loose. You can see it jiggling back and forth there. I haven't tightened any of these M5s up because we want to make sure that the gantry is square and hitting even at both the front and the back. Right now it's good and even on the back, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten these up. And I'm just going to do the top right now. Then I will pull it to the front. Make sure that we're even, so this one is just a little off from this one. When I go to the back, we seem to be even, so let's get this all the way to the front. I'm going to pull it a little bit, loosen these, give them a tighten back up while it's there, and then we'll check it. So that's just a little bit of play. We are hitting the back even. And the stops are on the Z. So it's just a little bit of binding. All right, now it feels like it's gone. Give these a loosen, run it back and forth, make sure the binding is not there. And then we'll tighten them down again. And again, these might, since they are part of the motion, it may not hurt to have them with some thread lock, but it's not 100% necessary. Again, my 2.4, none of my Vorons have the thread lock on these screws on the gantry, and I have had no problems with any of them coming loose. And I have pulled the salad fork apart and made sure that it was still good. That one is getting the boop upgrade, so I pulled it apart to add boop. And we got to tighten these on the bottom as well. And again, I'm feeling a little binding right there after tightening. I know I measured it and checked a couple weeks ago, but let's check it again and see. We are about 57 or 57.9 and 57.9. 41 and 41. So we seem square, but something's binding up right in this area right here. And this is, you got to rack it and make sure that it's running smoothly. And it's always possible there could be a twist in one of these beams, one of the extrusions, that could cause it to. Maybe I didn't get my rail centered as well as I thought. Now that all looks good, all nicely centered on that side. Seems to be the same over here. Those won't tell me if there's any kind of twist, even if it's slight either. So it's good for some things, but not everything. And it don't seem to feel it coming forward, just moving back. Let's loosen my carriage bolts a little bit and see if maybe that'll get it seated in there well. Kind of loosen everything up and get it to ride on there, and then that'll get everything to kind of align correctly before you come back and give it a little tighten. And then again with this one here with the 4, I want to do a cross pattern. I'm just going to do the 2, and we'll run it back and forth. Maybe I over tightened, causing it to bind. So I'm going to make sure it's running good before I tighten it even a little bit more. There we go. Now it's nice. And again, you just want to make sure you got good, smooth movement. You don't want it to have any kind of binding anywhere along its travel. If it does, that might cause problems, layer shifts, skips, and such as it's printing later. So you want to make sure you're moving nicely. This cable guide, I don't even know if I'm going to use it since I'll be using CAN bus, but if the cable is long enough for the can, I might just go ahead and run the chains and use them rather than an umbilical. The umbilical is likely to hit this top plexi when it gets put in. Okay, now everything's feeling nice and smooth. I'm not feeling any binding anywhere. We're hitting at the back at the right spots, both sides. Good. Everything feels nice on that. So got the gantry squared up. All right, let's see where we're at. I'm not worried about the belts right now, but let's get the X carriage on, and for that we'll go to the tap build guide. I believe you get it on first, and then you do the belts after. So next week we'll start with the belts. X limit switch that they're mentioning in here won't be done because it's going to be on the pod. Okay, so do I have, I don't remember if it, I looked at it, but I didn't pay that close attention to see if it came with the screws. And it looks like it does. It's got a little bag full of them. All right, so here is our tap, our CNC tap. And it just moves up and down nicely. A little bag of screws and our cable. Let's see if I can find a good angle for one of these cameras. I don't know if that's a good angle or not, but it's an angle. Scroll down here. All right, maybe we'll scroll down in a minute. There it goes. So they're showing remove the two M36s on the side before, or for the belt clamp. We may need to put this on next week with the belts. I can put it on now and just do take it off if I need to for the belts though, so that's not that big of a deal. We won't be installing the X limit switch on this one since we will be using the end stop pod, and the kit came with the cabling already pre-wired for that end stop pod, so I might as well just use it, or use the sensorless homing, but either way works for me. I don't really mind using the end stops, and I don't mind using the sensorless. The Voron V0 I've got now uses sensorless. My Prusa uses sensorless. The 2.4 uses an end stop pod, and the Salad Fork uses end stops, and they all work the same. I don't see any real difference between any of them. So if it will, this thing needs to be rebooted, I guess. Hopefully the stream has been fine, but it just seems to be dragging. So I think it has 2 screws pre-installed. It does for the to go into the rail, and you just kind of have to hold the end stop a little bit. And this one you do, because of the rigidity of the CNC parts, you do have to pay very close attention to tightening them down at the same rate so you don't over tighten. So let's see if I've got the right screwdriver out. Yes. So let's go back to the stream cam and see if we can keep from putting too much. So it looks like, yeah, I'll probably end up having to take it off to run the belts. But let's see if we can get it started lightly. And because you got to be so careful, I'm just going to take it down a little bit till it just kind of touches, and there we go. Those are both touching, and then the tops can go in just until they touch. And again, I don't think they don't mention using thread lock, and I've never used it on carriages before. But if you're concerned about it, cheap insurance. There we go. So that puts that on, and then that one is sliding nicely. And take my stops out so we can actually slide the whole way. They only come in black and red anodized aluminum, so I couldn't get it to match the colors. But it's going to be buried behind the tool head anyway. You're not going to be able to really see it. Now, looking at it, it looks like I'm probably going to have to take that off to get the belts in correctly. There's not quite enough there. But at the same, and these pieces here, these need to come out and off. Those are the belt clamps. We'll need those off so that we can run the belts. do it for that. Next week we will start with the belts and get that going. So that looks good. We'll go back here. They are showing to run the belts. I'll probably run one belt, tighten the right side down, put it back on the carriage, get my length, and then take the carriage back off, cut my belts both to identical length, get my right two started so that they're even, and then run them through and hook them in to that left side. I think they show to do the right side first. I'm right-handed. That makes sense to me to do the right side first. It doesn't matter which side you do first, as long as your belts are the same length and you keep them cut and their ends are matching up to the same length on both sides. That way you've got even belts. It makes it a lot easier to get that tension right and even, and not get the carriage racked again. You don't want that X carriage racked. You don't want your X axis racked. You want it to be nice and even along the whole drive, so you don't have inconsistencies in printing. So I've got the other screws. You can see maybe here on the right side, there is a spot right here. I don't know how well that's showing up, but there are some screw holes right here for a limit switch, so you can put your X-axis limit switch there if you're using one that's going to be run off the tool head. You don't have to use that. You could use sensorless homing, especially since using tap, or you can use this kit came with the end stop PCB for the end stop pod that goes on the right side of the X-axis, so it should be fine. I might have to double check how that's going to work with the tap installed. It is possible that I will have to either use sensorless or put an end stop on this one. This is the first time I'm putting one of the CNC taps on a printer, so I am not 100% sure how that's going to hit an end stop pod that's on the X-axis. So we'll see how that works out as we go along and get a little closer to where that's going to come on and come into play. If I need to, I'll just go sensorless homing. I'm not going to mess with dealing with the end stops. If I've got to split them up and not use that pod, sensorless homing works. I haven't had any problems on the ones I've got it on. Let's see. Looks like the Nikon worked out fine today. Did not have any problems. If I'd been there the few minutes ago, you'd have seen the dog walk by and go lay on the couch. So we are definitely, let's go back to this one. We are most definitely starting to look like a printer. We've got good movement on our X-axis. All of our Y joint, our Z joints are working well, or our Z-axis is working well. I get the brass nuts put back into each one. They've all got just a little bit of play, so that if the rods are not, if these lead screws are not straight and they've got a little wobble, that little bit of play will help eliminate any of the wobble in the screw, and the rail should keep everything nice and straight. I do still need to get these M3 roll-ins out of there. They've proven to be a pain. The ones that came with my Magic Labs kit on my 2.4, they rolled in simple, they rolled out simple. I could do it with my thumb and just get them right in and out. The springs were not super tight. They just rolled in nicely, but they held place if you were moving the printer around. So these seem fine. There's no problem with them. They work, but the spring is tight, so it makes it getting them rolled in and rolled out a little more difficult. So go back to that one. Maybe. All right. And then next week we will start, let's go back here. Next week should be belts. There we go, belts. We'll start with the belts next week. Get them installed. Get them tensioned. And see how everything's going. And I'll look through the manual again and see how far we'll get next week. Maybe next week will be a longer stream than an hour, and we'll get more accomplished. Definitely get the belts done. Let's go look. We got a few minutes yet, so we'll get the belts done next week first, following the guide to get the pathing right. And again, we will do. I'll probably do the top. I don't know which one I'll do, but I'll start on the right, get one run around, cut it to length with a good bit of extra. There looks to be like there'll be plenty in there, and if not, I'm pretty sure I've got some Gates belt that I can use if for some reason I mess up and don't get my belts run right. But we'll run one round, starting on the right side, run it all the way around through the path, cut it with extra on the left, pull it back out, make sure we've got 2 equal length belts. Then we'll run both belts, get them tightened down into the clamps, and then we'll work on getting them tensioned well enough to start with, so we can make sure that they're not causing any racking in our x-axis or y-axis with that X carriage. All right. I know I am not using that much memory and not that much CPU usage. I want to say, all right, so we won't need that because we're using tap. I don't believe. I'll double check and make sure. But I believe tap takes the place of that one, since it's where the belts will secure. A belt routing. This makes sure you're going around the pulley correctly. I'm still only using 41% of memory, so should not be causing any problems. It was on 16 gig instead of 32. But for some reason it seems to be just lagging. And I'm only 11% of my CPU, and I do believe I've got it set to use AV1 encoding on the ARC GPU that's in this thing, so I'm not quite sure. It may just need to be rebooted. I don't think it's been rebooted in a good while, a couple weeks at least. So it looks like belts. And the next carriage, again, that's the tap, take care of that. Let's close these out. And I did put a link to the CNC Tap in the description, both at the Chaoticlab site and at Fabrico's site, along with a link to the CNC Tap guide. I bought mine direct from both of mine direct from Chaoticlab. Fabrico didn't have any in stock when I bought mine, otherwise I would have ordered from Hector. But I took a little extra time to get it from Chaoticlab. They shipped from China, but it got here with no problems. Price was pretty much the same. I don't think there was really any difference. I think they were both about 50 bucks plus shipping. So it's a little pricey for it, I guess, but it's a really nice piece of kit, a lovely CNC piece. So I'm not going to complain about the price too much. And even compared to the price of this Formbot kit, I think the Formbot kit was like about $800. So you add in that you're paying already, you know, $800, $1,000, $1,200 for one of these kits. An extra 50 bucks really isn't that bad. That's cheaper than my hot end. The Voron Revo was 90, I think. So I'll pay the extra to get the tap. Doesn't bother me too much, but you can use printed tap. It's not a necessity to use the CNC. They work the same. All right, so it looks like next week we'll definitely do the belt and the bed. And let's do it this way. Go back to the start with the instructions, or the table of contents. Maybe. Maybe it's just Brave that's not wanting to work particularly well today. Let's see where this... See if I just reload Brave. Let's see if that might help a bit. Maybe I need to reboot my whole network stack. We do have fiber getting installed tomorrow, so that is going to give me synchronous down and up speeds, and hopefully will help with some of this. This seems to be more the computer that's chugging along than anything, though. And this is not even a year old, I don't believe, on this laptop. I think it's getting close to a year, but not quite a year old. And it's an i7-12700H with an ARC 370 GPU and 32 gig of RAM, so it should be plenty fast enough. It's not a gaming rig that I've got my desktop for. This was just so I had a good laptop that I could do various laptop things with and not have to worry about upgrading it right away or down the road. And the reason I went with it was because it did have 32 gig of RAM, because it does not have upgradable RAM. But with the 32 gig already, I was fine with it not being upgradable. It's not going to hurt to have, you know, 32 gig for a while, most likely. All right. And this is coming off of a network share on my network, so it could be something with my network, but with my network, I doubt it. But I'll double check all that this afternoon and see, especially with this coming so slow like this. And I just want to check and see where we're going to be next week with the belts and what the bed and where we're going after. I'd like it to be a little longer stream next week, so I'd like to have a plan. Well, it loads up really quick on my desktop, so I am thinking that it is something else causing some problems over here. So it probably just needs to be rebooted. I think I'm even hardwired, so that shouldn't, it's not my Wi-Fi causing a problem. Here we go. Let's see if this will load up. But looking on the other one, we're doing belts, print bed, afterburner, then wiring prep. So next week, we'll get through the belts, the print bed, and afterburner. And that way we're on to wiring prep and electronics the following week. Looks like wiring prep, electronics, controller prep, wiring skirts, and then panels are the order that they've got in the manual. So next week we'll get the belts, print bed, and the afterburner done, or stealth burner in this case. Get through those, and then we'll move on the following week to wiring electronics and getting all that done. And maybe we'll be pushing plastic that week, but it might be the following before we get to actually pushing some plastic through. So let's see if this will come up. And I'm going through the exact same switch to my main router and switch as my desktop. There, I only had one run in the room, and they're right next to each other. So I just put an extra switch in so I don't have to use wireless on the laptop all the time. When I'm streaming, it's hardwired through the dock. That way I don't have to worry about the latency that even Wi-Fi 6 can sometimes introduce. Get the higher throughput and run it better. All right, so here we have the table of contents. Introduction, hardware, frames done, AB, drive-by and idler done, Y-axis, Z-axis, and X-axis are all done. So next week we'll start with the belts, then we'll do the print bed, stealth burner in this case. I'm not using afterburner, so we'll move on to stealth burner. And then we'll definitely get that done next week. We'll see how long that takes. We're around the 2-hour mark. We'll stop. And then the following week, we'll probably start on with wiring prep, getting the electronics. Since we are using inverted electronics on this, there's going to be a little learning curve. I've never done the inverted electronics, so maybe we may still do the wiring prep if we've got enough time next week, but definitely the following week will be we'll do the electronics with that inverted electronics, and I think we'll probably just dedicate that whole week to just the electronics and getting everything in there. I might start looking, I haven't yet, to see about the possibility of a clear deck panel. I think that might look pretty cool to have a clear deck panel instead of the black one. So with the inverted electronics, have that bottom panel's black, and then all your wiring electronics, assuming you get it really nice and clean, I think it would look really cool if you have a clear deck panel. So while it's moving around, you can see all your electronics under there with those inverted electronics. I mean, might as well look a little cool while you're printing if you're going to do it that way and not just have that ease of access that the inverted electronics give you. But I think we're going to call it there, guys. Keep an eye out. I'll try. I know I didn't get this stream posted last night. Yesterday was a very busy day. I had volunteered to run a booth at Nashville Pride. and forgot that we were hosting a game night last night, and had to just run the whole day to make sure both things got taken care of. And it was at like 9:30, 10 o'clock before the last people left last night from game night. Still had to get a shower from sitting out in that hot, sweaty sun at Pride all day. So it was after 10 by the time I was even getting in. Hey, Josh, sorry I'm about to about to close the stream out. I did get things done though. The x-axis is done, and congrats on getting 90% on your 2.4. So I was real close to buying one a couple weeks ago when they were at half price over at Matter Hackers. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't get the stream posted in time last night. My day yesterday was overfilled. So I'm going to try to get it posted next Sunday or maybe even Saturday to get it so people know it's coming up. That way I'm not just sitting here talking to myself. I did try to keep everything up on what I was doing. The Nikon is still working this week. So when I did use it, you'll be able to see, except when I had bad camera angle. So, but keep an eye out next week. I was just going over that. Next week, we'll be doing the belts, the print bed, and stealth burner. Might do some of the wiring prep, and then the following week is going to be all the inverted electronics. And I think we're going to do 10:30 start time for Central Time where I'm at, and see how that works. It seemed to work out last week. If I need to push it back to 11 for people, I'm fine with doing that. My Mondays are normally open. But keep an eye out for that, and let me know how your 2.4 goes when you get it finished. I thought that was a fun build. I'm kind of liking the Trident a little better. It's not as complex on the Z. It is really where it differs, and it's a whole lot easier to mount the gantry with it not being the flying gantry. But the 2.4 was a fun build. That was my first build other than the Prusa, so it was a fun build and a good learning experience coming from the Prusa, which does not have anywhere near as many moving parts as the 2.4. But yeah, go back and watch this one. Oh no, it was not as bad as I thought either. It was the Trident's easier, but the 2.4 is not hard. It was not as bad as I thought it was going to be when I first looked at it, and I'm like, oh, this is really complex. And the guys that did the manual did a great job in getting it in a good order to where it was pretty simple to get together. But yeah, I'm gonna take off. It's about lunchtime for me, and after a full day yesterday, I need to recharge. But I did want to get a stream out today and get some of this done. So go back and watch from the beginning. All we really did, it's only a little over hour 15, hour 20. All we really did was get the x-axis done. So let's see if we can see it. So you can see here, I've got the x-axis done, got it nice and smooth, and I got the CNC Tap mounted. I will have to pull it off next week to run the belts because of the way the belts run through that. It can be, and hopefully I did a good job as I was explaining what we're going to do next week to limit the confusion. And then when we do it next week and people are able to watch, they should be able to see it pretty well. But have a great day. Anybody watching later on the replays, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks for stopping in, Josh.